can make a difference.
Christians do bring an element of salt and light to contemporary affairs.
Our Lord said that we were to be in the world and not of the world.
If we as Christians will allow God to melt our hearts, the same fire that is melting us will melt those around us.
I hope the applause was for my 5 young kids because they deserve it. And that'll be my out today. We have the championship Little League game at 6 o'clock, so we'll be out of here on time, no doubt about it. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. Watching Kay speak, I was very inspired. And actually, you're going to find that my presentation segues off of what she was saying, especially towards the end, when I saw many of you in the room nodding and affirming her ideas because they were very good ideas and very practical. And Kay's learned from experience, and so have I. I do work on a daily basis with corporate CEOs, physicians, pharmaceutical companies, athletes, lawyers, and many others who are asked on a daily basis to speak to the media. It's not something most people like to do, but it can be one of the most effective tools you have. And typically, it doesn't cost you a dime. I've been doing this for 13 years now, and in the last 13 years, I've also tried on a regular basis to share my ministry with the causes that I believe in most. I've done a number of projects for Americans United for Life, one of the best groups I've found in the country today, and I work also on a local basis with crisis pregnancy centers in my community, trying to help people make sure that their message is heard. Now, I'm sandwiched between a very dynamic speaker, Kay, and I precede Peter, Paul, and Mary. So I'm going to start with a couple of bold assertions to keep you interested in my presentation. First of all, I have to let you know, the media is not out to get you. My husband is one of the toughest investigative reporters in the country, and he'd be the first to tell you that in every newsroom in this country, if you were to take a visit, you're going to fail to find anybody in a back room plotting to control the news. They don't proactively plot against you. So let's dispel that myth right now. The reality is the news organizations today are driven by numbers. When the entertainment conglomerates of the world bought the news organizations, right after I left, it became a whole different world. Right now, there's a group of people at Disney in New York looking at white pieces of paper and trying to decide where they can slash in order to make a profit. There's no concept for news. There's no concept for balance. There's no concept for reality. That's the reality of the situation. So they're not out to get you. They're out to get viewers. The other myth that I like to dispel is this. You can't change the system. We can't change the system. And if you came here today to try to elicit ideas from me on how we can change the system, go out there and wait for Peter, Paul, and Mary. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. But I do know this. You can make a personal difference. We can't change the system, but you can make a personal difference. And I learned that lesson in the pro-life movement. I was getting frustrated. When are we going to overturn this decision? When's this going to happen? And along with my colleagues, we suddenly realized, well, it may not happen in my lifetime, maybe my kid's lifetime, but we can make a difference. We can help the people who need help, who thus, I would hope, are going to help others. Now, has the media written that story? Not as much as I would like, but you can start. You can start on a local level. You can start in your hospital with your local newspaper, and you can make a difference. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. And I'm going to give you a method. Those of you that are physicians, you know the value of a good surgical method. Those of you that are pastors, you know the value of a well-prepared sermon. I'm going to give you a methodology that you can use each and every day on the issues that matter to you most. The methodology, the good news is, takes 2 minutes to implement, because sometimes that's all you've got. But it's a methodology that will allow you to have a place at the table, to make news, not just noise, and more importantly, turn words into action. And that's why you're bothering to talk to the media, I might imagine, to motivate, persuade. How can you turn words into action even though sometimes it feels like you don't stand a chance. Well, you can, and I'll show you how to do it. If you go to page 27 in your book, we have a very simple handout. I invite you to take notes. I want you to own this document. I want you to customize it to your specific needs. And let me start with your needs. Give me a quick show of hands. How many of you have spoken to reporters in your career? Ah, so you need the graduate level, huh? I would love to hear from you on what some of the problems have been with the media. What do you find challenging? What upsets you the most about your media interaction? Give me a couple of thoughts. This is your only chance to media bash for the next hour, so let loose. What bothers you the most about speaking to the media, those of you that have done it? Anybody ever been misquoted? Okay. Why do you think that happens? I'll show you today, and I'll show you how to prevent it. What else has been troublesome? Louder, please. You were cut off? Were you on a live program and they went to commercial? Rude, very rude. But I'll show you how to control that in the future. Most of the television programs and the radio programs are run by computers. When you're watching Good Morning America and you see Diane Sawyer say to her guest, "We have 10 seconds left," she's not in control. There's a computer in control 6 floors above her. So when she says you have 10 seconds left, you literally have 10 seconds left. But I'll show you what you can do in that environment to make sure that you get your points across, no matter how much time you have. I had a comment on the left. They edited your remarks and probably didn't pick the piece that you liked the most. True? Pardon me? True. You say too much? Okay. You say too much and you give them a lot of liberty to pick and choose. Absolutely. And I'm going to show you how to control that as well. Other media problems. How many of you have done TV? Yeah? How'd you look? Hopefully nobody worried about how you looked. They were so fascinated by what you were saying. And that's what, truly, that's what's most important. That's what's most important. Any other media concerns specifically? Yes, sir. Yeah, preset agenda, absolutely. You know, I've got to go to Lou Grant at 9 a.m., and he says to me, "Kid, what story are you going to turn today?" He doesn't call me kid anymore, but he used to. And I have to kind of craft a story to keep my boss happy. Well, I'm going to go down and I'm going to cover this protest, and here's what I think I can do with the story, Lou. Lou sits back and listens and says, "Yeah, that sounds good, kid. Go get the story." Do you think I want to come back to Lou Grant at 4 o'clock and tell him that it didn't pan out? No. But you can handle that. You can change that. I'm going to show you how. They do have a preset agenda. And when you're speaking to a Mike Wallace, the agenda he has in his hand is not even his agenda. It was handed to him by a producer 30 minutes earlier. He's done no research. He has no clue. All he knows how to do is intimidate. But again, we want to use that outlet because a lot of people watch 60 Minutes. Comment? The good news today is that the method I'm going to give you for the media can also be applied to everything else you're doing. Presentations, meetings, everything. Even the guy you meet on the airplane, who could turn out to be the most important person you meet this month. And right now, I'd like you to think about what I'm about to give you as a good golf swing. Now I've got you interested. If you can use my method in everything you do, whether that's on grand rounds, whether that's speaking to your family, whether that's giving that all-important speech, think of the method I'm about to give you as a good golf swing. If you embrace it, I want you to use it on every course, with every player, in every type of win condition, and you will win. The golf swing really focuses in on the way you prepare for the media and prepare for your presentations. It's all in the preparation. It's all in the backswing. What I'm going to give you is a 5-step method of preparation, page 1, that will allow you to correct every need that you've just addressed in this room, to control the editing, to make sure that if you're cut off, you still get your point across, to control a reporter's pre-sought agenda, and more importantly, to make sure that you make news, not noise, so people talk about your issue on the back of the bus and hopefully support you because of it. 5 simple steps. It'll take me about 30 minutes to teach it. It takes 2 minutes to implement. And the preparation I want you to focus on is centered more on the quality of the preparation, not the quantity. You don't need to spend 2 hours preparing for an interview. 2 minutes will do it for you if you do it right. So here we go, step number 1, focus on the audience. I would say that the biggest mistake I see people making is they get into an interview and they let the reporters control the agenda because they treat the reporter as their endpoint. They go in there and they sit down and they only answer the questions that the reporters pose. They wait for the reporters to take them to the right place. They spend too much time trying to figure out what the reporter's motivation is without thinking about the person they're really trying to reach. I did an interview with Sandy when you were listening to Kay, and I might have surprised her a bit because when I sat in the chair as a media coach, before I let her even turn on the microphone, I said, who's listening to the program right now? What do you think they're interested in knowing? And who'd you talk to right before I came to the microphone? That gave me a lot of leverage in that interview because I wasn't just talking to Sandy. She's a delightful person. But if I had just answered Sandy's questions and gone no further, she would have controlled the agenda, not me, the media expert. So by finding out that she actually had a diverse audience, driving home from work in the western suburbs, I targeted my comments towards that audience. Guess what I get out of the interview? Something positive, something motivating. I want you to do that as well. You're not speaking to Mike Wallace. And if you only go as far as Mike Wallace, you will get nothing out of that opportunity. You're speaking to the 58-year-old couple who sit home on Sunday nights to watch 60 Minutes. What do they really care about? That's the audience focus I want you to have. And with that focus, my friends, you have just unleashed your power with the media. And you have far more power than a reporter. On a daily, hourly, weekly basis, you are far closer to the patients, to the residents, to the customers than as a reporter I will ever be. And guess who I'm trying to sell my newspaper to? Your same patients, the people in the communities. I'm not out there every Saturday morning, standing there, trying to persuade people, talking to people about the issue, but you are. And if you can bring me that piece that only you hear on a daily basis, and if you start with that in my interview, I have to write your story. I have to. Because I know as a reporter, that's what people are going to talk about tomorrow morning in the back of the bus. And guess what? If you give me the so what, who cares what's in it for me for this particular issue, when I go back to Lou Grant at 4 o'clock, I get to say, hey, guess what, Lou? I got a better story than you and I both thought possible. I'm going to lead the news tonight, and I will, if you have given me the piece that people are talking about on the back of the bus. It will make a tremendous difference for you. It's a pronoun switch. I don't want you to speak to the media through your eyes as the advocate. That seems obvious. And I really don't even want you to speak about it through your eyes as an organization or a hospital. I want you to speak about the issues consistently through the eyes of the people who are really driving the decisions. If you do that consistently, talk about it through the you perspective, not the me or the we perspective, you will be able to much better control what they actually write. And they'll want to come back to you time and time again. Let me start with a video clip to illustrate how important audience focus is. And since it's Friday and it's 5 o'clock, I'm going to give you kind of a fun clip to start. I'm going to show you 3 members of the former Chicago Bulls. I'm a Chicago girl. And I'd like to show you how they came to the podium to thank the city of Chicago for their 5th championship ring. It's a very interesting clip because in 1 minute and 12 seconds, you're going to see 3 members of the Bulls personify this jump from me to we to you. The first player you're going to see is a guy who always talked about it through his eyes. He's someone you like to laugh at, but not someone I'm sure I'd invite to dinner. The second player is the guy who always talked about it through the we perspective, the team, the association, the company. He's the guy that never got the recognition he deserved, and certainly never got the money. But the third player, the hero, the master, always talked about it through the eyes of the people who mattered most. Listen to the 3 players, and then I'll weave 3 powerful lessons for you out of this very fun clip, and I'll bet you've guessed all 3 players. Joshua, would you play the first clip, please? Volume, please. Volume. You really don't need to hear what he's saying. It's very self-serving.
And people that live in Utah, I apologize for that. But you know what? You know, it's just so much you can do to kick a man down, but I said, hell with the NBA, I'll be back, baby.
Do you
I'll
care?
be back, baby. Whoa. Certainly not
I
the
just want to thank you fans for your support this season. I've been here 10 long seasons. We've been able to niche out 5 great championship seasons. And we look forward to bringing it back for number 6. So let's come on back and get down for our crown.
That's the slogan, get down for our crown.
Coaches and all the Bulls organizations, we want to say that this championship goes out to all the working people here in the city of Chicago that goes to work every single day. They bust their butts to make a living, and what we do, we come in 2 hours out of the day to give you a break and have something to cheer about, have something to be proud about when you go to another city. So hopefully, come 1998, you guys can go out and celebrate and go back to every city and say we won number 6.
Well, we got 6, we didn't get 7. But here's the point, and it's a good point. Nobody is going to invest their time, their money, or their support based on what happened yesterday. Dennis? And no one's really going to invest their time, their money, or their support based on what you're doing today, Scotty. Rather, we invest our time, our money, and our support based on what you are doing to solve tomorrow's unmet needs. And that's what the media is looking for, whether they realize it or not. That's what drives the stock market. You don't buy stock in a company based on what the company did yesterday. You want to know what's going to happen tomorrow. Thus, when you are asked to comment on the issues, I highly suggest you think about not just addressing the pain of yesterday, but giving very specific ways that we can build for tomorrow. That's what will bring them to your side of the table, just like it did for Michael Jordan, because when Michael Jordan got hurt, when he got caught gambling, when he retired, he didn't lose one corporate sponsor. He couldn't, because he always did it through the eyes of the people who are really driving the decisions. The guy on the South Side who paid $75 to take his kid to a game, you have to support him. You don't have a choice. And think about the way Michael Jordan painted pictures. You know, folks, nobody is going to remember the words that you speak. Rather, they remember the pictures you compel them to see. Think about it. You carry pictures with you every day. You don't carry words. Thus, what a marvelous opportunity through the media to paint the pictures that are going to compel the right actions. And it's all up to you. But if you don't have that audience focus, that you perspective, you're going to miss the boat. You're going to waste the opportunity. It's the power you bring to the media encounter. Step number 2. All right, I've got my audience focus. Now, how do I sequence it? Simple. Always speak top down. Right now on your piece of paper, draw an inverted pyramid, an upside-down triangle, an inverted pyramid, so you remember this concept. It's what I was taught in J school, and it applies today. People are having a really hard time processing information because there's so much information. And we are no longer passive recipients. I don't sit back and read the newspaper. Who has time? I go out there and actively pursue what I want to know. Thus, it has become very important for you to always speak in a way that directly links to the way we all listen today. We all listen for the headline first. So at the top of your inverted pyramid, write headline. And I must tell you, step number 2 proves to be a tremendous challenge for those of you who are trained physicians, lawyers, and scientists. Because in law school, in medical school, you were trained to do it just the opposite. When you write a piece for JAMA, you outline the methodology, the hypothesis, and then you come up with a conclusion. When you're presenting a case, you build your case, and then you give that bottom line. That's not the way you should be speaking to the media. And that's why many doctors get misquoted. That's why many scientists never get a chance to speak to an issue, because as a reporter, I simply can't comprehend it. And there's a physical problem. I'm in the newsroom, typing away, talking to you, trying to keep up with your answers. If you answer my question the way you do on Grand Rounds, putting your conclusion at the end, when you get down there, guess what, folks? I'm still back on the third thing you said. And when I go back to my notes to write the piece, I have all these little sentence fragments. You're not going to like the editing. And I'm going to misquote you. I don't mean to, but I simply can't write it down legibly. I want you to start with it. I want you to start with it, because not only does that allow you to get a more direct quote, it no longer matters if they cut you off if you had started with it, but it also makes you the context provider. This is very, very important today. Would anybody in this room read the play-by-play of the Cubs game without looking at the score first? No. Would anybody watch the U.S. Open on television without the little leaderboard in the upper left-hand corner? No. Because without it, you have no context. You're not going to let the doctor treat you without telling you whether it's going to hurt or not. So we all listen for the headline first. And without it, we stop listening. So think of the power. Think of the power in your communities. If you are the ones through the media speaking top down, you are not going to drive the context. I will come back to you for further comment, because I know you're the person who can frame it for me and help me understand it better. This works. I'll prove it to you right now. Here's a very dramatic example. This is an example that comes from an airline disaster in Florida. But it focuses more around not just the airline, but the way the government mishandled the situation. This is ValueJet. When ValueJet crashed in Florida, the federal government decided that they needed to get down to the swamp very quickly and try to defend the airline. What? I said as a consumer. How can the FAA be down there boosting revenues for the airline and still be objectively guarding my safety? They can't do both. The AMA here in Chicago got into a lot of trouble last year when they tried to do that with Sunbeam. You can't do both. They tried. And the media loved it. They went wild with the story. 3 weeks into the crisis, the FAA realized that they not only had lost integrity, they're about to lose their jobs. So they decided to try to fix it. We're going to go live on Good Morning America. We're going to shut down this airline, and by God, we're going to restore Clark Forsyth's faith in our system. Well, unfortunately for the FAA, they've never taken this course. So I'd like you to listen. I'd like you to listen, first of all, to the head of the FAA, a guy with 30 years of brilliant experience. But note how quickly you tune him out. You stop listening, because he's not answering your "so what, who cares what's in it for me." He's trying to bottom up his information. And then, while you're feeling confused and vulnerable, listen to his opponent, a woman who has just a little fraction of his experience, but she speaks top down, and she's the one you'll probably remember 3 years ago to the date. Roll the next tape, Joshua.
Appears to be that circumstance. You recall that we began investigating ValueJet actually in late 1995. We heightened that in February of 1996 with a special investigation, and subsequent to the accident, when I made that statement, we employed a major 30-day concentrated oversight of the air carrier. So we've been looking at the airline for the better part of 7 or 8 months. Now, after this 30-day investigation, which really was 4 years compressed into 4 weeks of oversight, we determined that the airline was not in compliance with some of our basic maintenance regulations. And it is in that context that we asked them to stop flying.
But Mr. Hinson, if you had ValueJet under a special emphasis inspection at the time of the crash, and that special emphasis investigation didn't point up the problems that show that ValueJet is unsafe, it seems to me that's as damning an indictment of your system as it is of anything else.
Well, I can understand why you might think that, but understand that in the special inspection it wasn't nearly as concentrated. We would have no doubt arrived at the same place, but it would have been a little bit later because it wasn't as concentrated. And I can assure you that ValueJet will have to demonstrate to us that they meet our tough FARs before they're allowed to fly again.
Let me turn to Susan Clayton that I mentioned just a few moments ago. Susan, you flew a lot of time with ValueJet. Give us an idea of what it's like to work, or what it was like to work for that airline.
It's a sweatshop.
A sweatshop, but is it an unsafe airline?
Well, I'm not a mechanic and I'm not a pilot, but when you get on the airplane and you see things being held together with duct tape, you see the flight attendant jump seats being held together with duct tape, there's trash all over the plane, the lavatories are overflowing, it makes you wonder what's going on outside of the airplane.
Some might say, the airline, I suspect, will say, this is a disgruntled union employee. This is not an accurate depiction of what our airline is like.
Absolutely not. I would love to see the airline survive. We've been calling the FAA for over a year now, trying to get them to listen to us. There were red warning flags all work and safety records in the low-fare, low-cost carriers. You can have a safe airline with low fares. Look at Southwest. It's a classic example. But unfortunately, Louis Jordan and Robert Priddy decided to run their airline by cutting so many corners. It just can't be done.
Stop. Thank you. So the real story is she probably was a disgruntled union employee, and maybe she wanted a job with Southwest Airlines. Right? But the key is she controlled the dialogue. What happened there, and what can we learn from that? We can learn 3 important lessons. Going back to step number 1, the audience focus, she said to herself, you know, this guy's got 30 years of experience. I've only been around for 2. What am I going to do? Oh, easy. I'm the one who greets the passengers. And guess who watches Good Morning America? The passengers. So because she had the right audience focus, she controlled the dialogue, which perhaps was not fair, but that's the way it works. Secondly, she recognized that people today don't want products and they don't want services. They want solutions. So she offered a solution. Look at Southwest. They can do it. You want a safe airline for low fares? The world will follow you if you speak as a solutions provider. So I want you to always start your remarks with the unmet needs and then match it to your point of view. Rather than pushing information like David Hinson did, she set out to pull support. And it worked. David Hinson got fired 24 hours later, and she became the media darling. And the other thing she recognized was that nobody remembers the words. People remember the pictures you compel them to see. And I give counsel to some of the major airlines, and I knew she was exaggerating, but you know what? The next time I flew, I had to take a peek. I had to see if there was duct tape on my airplane. I had to look. Think about how you can do that through the media as well. What are the things you want people to recognize in their communities? What are the things you want people to think about the next time they are involved in a particular situation? It's up to you to paint those pictures, the pictures for tomorrow that will compel action and turn words into action. And it can be done, and I've seen it done. Step number 3. Well, what are we going to say? Easy. You want to always speak in terms of answering the unmet questions. When I talk about anticipating the questions before an interview, I'm not talking about the questions that you're going to get from the reporters. You're wasting your time. They will always ask you the same darn questions. I want you to focus not on the reporters' questions. I want you to focus on the unanswered questions of the people in the audience. What are those unanswered questions? What are those unmet needs, and what are you doing to solve those needs? How many people would even realize that there are all alternatives to this type of research, and it doesn't have to be fetal cells? How many people even know that? Not many. So you want to talk about it in terms of a solution to an unmet need. I'm sure there are many people out there who would yearn for that kind of alternative. But because nobody has presented it as a solid alternative to an unmet need, not everybody has recognized that solution. And what this will do for you is give you what I call the golden wrench in the toolbox. The number 1 way to predict what the quote's going to be, or the soundbite, is to recognize that they will always, always quote the comparison. Pick up the newspaper. I challenge you tonight. Take a red pen and circle every quote, listen to the news, and note every soundbite. It is always a comparison. And there's no coincidence here. If you switch from channel 2 to 5 to 7, they all use the same soundbite from Mayor Daley. They all pick the same thing that President Clinton said. There's no science here. They always pick the comparison. And people like President Clinton learned long ago that that's how you drive the quote. That's how you control the media, by speaking in sound bites, by speaking in comparisons. Is the economy stupid? Bridge the 21st century? Those are comparisons. So here's what you can do. If you speak in terms of comparisons, you will be quoted, and you will be able to predict what they quote, what they choose to edit. For example, Sandy, I was talking to Sandy on radio about this about an hour ago. She said, what do you mean by comparisons? I said, well, for example, let's say your local news station is doing a piece on a pro-choice rally, which they always cover, and you're asked to comment. How can you control what they pick? Well, if you say something like, you know, Teri, for every 6 pro-choicers out here today, there are 60 pro-life women in the western suburbs of Chicago who right now, as we sit here and speak, are gathering diapers to help women with problem pregnancies. They're going to quote that. They have to. Not only is it compelling, but it's a comparison. And everybody who hears that will talk about it tomorrow morning. Everybody. Think about the quotes you remember from history. Ask not what your country can do for you. One small step. If I may play doctor for a moment, research indicates that the new pieces of information that people remember on a daily basis are the pieces that somebody has attached to what you already know. That's how you teach. It's what I've done. It's what Kay did. So think about how you can teach through the media through comparison. Attach your ideas to something I already know. Teach through comparison. Formulate these comparisons before you speak to a reporter. Call me a year from now, and I know you're going to say, Teri, this really works. If you look at the quotes on the front page of the Wall Street Journal today, I don't have to brag. I can tell you that I have orchestrated many of those quotes from the CEO of AT&T. It's easy to predict what they're going to use. You just have to have the insight. Try it. Prove me wrong. And you know what? People buy on comparison. So if you give them comparisons, you're halfway there. Step number 4. What should be guiding your dialogue? Simple. Before you speak, you need to have one core theme. No longer can you go into a presentation, a meeting, or an interview with 3 message points. Well, I have 3 messages I want to make today. Can't do that. You know why? You only remembered, in reality, as great as she was, you only remembered 10% of what Kay said. Whatever you talked about out there when you went to get your granola bar, that's what you're going to take home with you. It's that simple. Hopefully Kay knew that. What Kay needs to do, what I need to do, is to make sure that when we speak, everything we say is attached to one core theme. So no matter what you talked about around the granola table, our core theme was a part of it. I invite you to do the same thing. Have one core theme. Now, you can have 3 messages, but they have to be attached to a greater good. If you have one core theme for a presentation or an interview, suddenly the editing process doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter what I put in the lead. If your core theme is a part of everything you said, you'll get to control what they write and control the headline, because the headline writers only read the first paragraph. And this does something else for you. If you have one consistent theme you can come back to when you're being asked difficult questions, whether you're on radio, on television, or speaking to a local reporter, maybe you're in a panel discussion. If you have one theme you can keep coming back to, you become a personal, living example of consistency, believability, and trust. People will walk away, and they may not remember what you said, but they remember you were consistent. And people trust consistency. That's how President Clinton got elected. He kept coming back to that same theme. And he'd go into those town hall meetings, he'd say, I know the price of bread, and I know that Susie over there is worried about her kids going to school tomorrow morning, and I know you need 3,000 new police officers. It all comes down to the economy. And even though he never made good on any of his promises, at the time people believed he was actually going to do something. Let me give you an example that I'm actually more proud of than that one. Let me show you someone that I actually trained who brought this principle home to me. I worked with him about 10 years ago, but it's still a classic example. This is a gentleman I trained for United Airlines right here in Chicago. And I trained him right before the Sioux City, Iowa crash. I'm sure you remember that one. That was that plane that cartwheeled on the tarmac. It happened at 3:30 on a Friday afternoon. At 5 o'clock, United was holding a press conference, despite the fact that their legal counsel said, you can't do this. We got rumors, speculation, liability. Are you crazy? United said, we may be, but if we don't get out there and show the world that we're going to be the source of information on this issue, someone else is going to speak for us. They didn't want that to happen. I'm sure you can see the relevancy in that piece. So take a look at how this gentleman handled a very aggressive group of reporters. And I want you to listen for the core theme. I want you actually to tell me what you hear as the core theme, and I'll weave 2 more important lessons for you. It's one core message. Joshua, play the tape. Hopefully we'll have some volume.
I want to express on behalf of all of the employees of United Airlines our most profound sympathy for the family members and loved ones of the passengers of Flight 232. We know that this is a sad and terrible time for them, and all of our thoughts and prayers are with them. We at United are doing everything humanly possible to care for the people who have been affected by this accident, and we are cooperating fully with the federal authorities to determine its cause. I would like to notify any family members or loved ones who are attempting to get information about passengers that we are working to confirm the facts about fatalities and survivors, and we will notify family members as soon as we possibly can. Telephone calls can be directed to local United reservation offices and will be taken care of through that means. Thank you.
Mr. Nagin, can you tell us how many fatalities were on that flight?
We cannot confirm the number of fatalities at this time. As soon as information is available that is accurate, it will be disclosed here through this briefing process, as well as through the authorities at the scene.
Survivors?
There are a number of survivors. We cannot confirm the exact number at this time. Hopefully, we'll be in a position to do that.
There are some counts that the survivors reached 125 from hospitals in the Iowa area. Is that a number that you are hearing?
We would not want to confirm that number. We are so happy that there are survivors. Our prayers are with them, and as soon as that number is determined, the number will be released.
It's our understanding that there was a phone patch in from the pilots to Chicago right before the crash. Can you tell us what was said?
No, I would not want to comment it at this time. Certainly, any information that was available from the aircraft will be made available through the investigation.
Prior to takeoff, was there any indication at all that this plane had any problems?
We have no indication, and nor would we want to speculate it. That just would not be fair to the process of the investigation, and certainly any facts pertinent to the flight itself will be fully disclosed through the investigation process. No, I could not speculate what occurred. Obviously, the accident occurred on landing in an emergency situation, but beyond that, we're just not prepared to comment at this time, and I think you understand that. As information becomes available, though, we will be making periodic reports here to keep all of you and the public at large informed as to the information that is credible and confirmed. I think in this situation, it is not fair to the families of the loved ones or to the investigation to speculate, and we would not want to do that.
Thank you. Larry went on for 45 minutes in that press conference, and then they kept him on the air for almost 24 hours. That's what happens in a crisis. Once they get you to the microphone, it's almost impossible to leave. Nonetheless, if you were sitting home with your families, would someone give me some perspective on what you heard as a core theme? What did you hear? We care? Family? Great. Thank you. That's exactly what I had hoped. What does that mean for us? It means two things. First of all, United recognized that the audience was not the reporters. Many reporters knew more than they did. In order to control that media environment, they had to go beyond the reporters. They had to go to you and I, sitting at home, wondering if we knew anybody on the plane, God forbid, but also wondering if we were safe to fly tomorrow morning. So they went directly to your unmet need, and they wanted to show control and stability. And how did they do it? By empowering Larry to have one core theme that you came back to no matter what. Larry became a living example of the control and stability. They didn't even really have to say it. You walked away with that image. The other thing they recognized was that it would have been very easy for the world to criticize UAL, the big conglomerate. I can't tell you what Microsoft has been going through. I can never forgive a conglomerate, but I can forgive a person, and I am not going to forget until I forgive. By putting a face on the issue, they allowed me to forgive them. It was all about people. We heard about the heroic pilot the next day. It's all about people. I can easily criticize a conglomerate, easily criticize a movement, easily criticize an association, but it's really hard to criticize the people who are being affected by the issues. So if you put yourself on the right side of the issue and put a face on the issues, you may not be victorious tomorrow, you may not be victorious next week, but you're leaving behind a mark, a definite mark. And the way you do that is not only to have that one core theme, but to go to the fifth and final step. Kay was right on the mark. You have to prove it. You have to have good, vivid support. Examples. Paint the pictures that you want people to see. If they think of your group as a bunch of radicals, it's up to you to paint the right pictures through the media of what's really happening. And paint pictures for tomorrow, not yesterday. It's the pictures for tomorrow that are really going to compel me to make my decision. And localize your pictures. If you give a newspaper reporter a local example from your community, it will get used. Because again, you're giving me the piece that people are talking about on the back of the bus. Tell stories. I think one last Clinton comment, and that's it. I think if you think back on the last year, you'll recognize via the media that it became far easier for people in our country to understand a simple lie than it was a complex truth. There's a lot of complexity in this room today, both from medical and ethical perspective. What you need to do through the media is take your complex truth and present it in a simple form. And a story is one of the best ways to do that. I'm very proud of the work I've done in medicine, particularly with the pharmaceutical companies and with the specialty societies. And we learned long ago that when Mary Tyler Moore talks about diabetes, when Christopher Reeves talks about spinal disability, people become aware. Stereotypes fall and funding increases. Think of the power of a story, one simple story. Let me show you someone, a doctor, a psychologist, who got caught up in what I think is probably one of the absolute worst interviews I've seen in the last 2 years. But I'd like you to watch how he finally redeems himself with the power of a story. This is a gentleman who walked into a media interview with no preparation, no thought on what could happen to him in this interview, and no thought about who the audience really was. You're going to feel his pain, but then you'll see that he finally gets one moment to educate when he goes to the power of a story. Next tape.
Depression or anxiety. And in many cases, it's been clinically very useful for patients I've had who have anxiety disorders or obsessive compulsive disorders. And depression looks different in children than adults, but in terms of its effectiveness, for people for whom it would be effective, it's certainly been very effective.
Define it? But wait a second, doctor. As I understand it, FDA has not approved it for children because we don't have the studies, and children are not developed totally. And as a result, this changing the brain chemistry could indeed affect their development. Is that not correct?
Well, the thing is that that's not what the issue's about, really. I think...
But, you know, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt because Bay is absolutely right, and this is the key point. The largest study done about the effect of Prozac and other antidepressants on children involved 70 children, 70, who completed that study at the University of Texas. And this is the study that Eli Lilly submitted to the FDA, and it is on this study that they are asking for approval for children.
Mariana, if there's something that's going to help someone, and I don't know where you get your information from,
I get my information from the
thing is that if there's something that's going to, no, about the study, I understand.
Where do you get your information about the effects on children? Just from your own patients?
And
how many patients have you prescribed? How many children have you prescribed Prozac to?
Mariana,
how many?
Listen, the fact
Why
is
don't you answer the question? A dozen? 2 dozen?
Because that question's absurd.
It's not
the issue
absurd,
is,
because
no,
you have no evidence. You just said circumstantial.
All right, one at a time.
Mariana.
One at a time. Doctor, you go right ahead.
Thank you. The issue is, does something help someone or not? And there have been kids who've had very serious problems. There's one youngster I saw just a few weeks ago who had an obsessive compulsive disorder. This child would not be able to let his mother leave the home without having incredible massive anxiety. They tried all kinds of therapy, and I'm a strong, strong believer in therapy, in cognitive therapy, behavior therapy. And until they were able to use an SSRI, they used Prozac with this youngster. There was not a change, and this medicine helped this child.
All right, so
and
what kind of safeguards, doctor? What kind of safeguards
That's
do you
about all I want
also...
to hear. Thank you, Joshua. It didn't get any better after that. But he lost sight of his audience. You're not there to argue with Arianna Huffington and Babe Buchanan. God help you, you'll never emerge. The key was, well, you never should have done the program, but the key was to find the power of a story. The audience was parents who said, what if it was my kid? And the power of a story really worked for him. Analogies, number 3 on your list of support. Use analogy, use comparisons. I'm going to show you another quick video, a more positive approach. I do a lot of work throughout the year with the medical schools in the country. I train a lot of the medical deans through the Association of American Medical Colleges. And I was out in Washington doing a session, and the executive director of the association came to me and needed some quick help. Ted Koppel had called, and he wanted him to come on his program on Nightline and talk about residency programs. Is it true that patients are dying because residents are being forced to work 36-hour shifts? Whoa, said the good doctor, I guess I better talk about this. So in my prep session, he wanted to talk about monitoring and accreditation. I said, wait a minute. I think you have to find a way to put this in perspective for mom and pop in their pajamas, because that's the audience. So we came up with a real simple analogy that I think you might enjoy. Here's how you can frame an issue via the media with one quick analogy. Next tape.
The system as it now exists?
Well, I'm satisfied with much of it, Ted. I think it can always be improved, and I think we're always looking for ways to make it better.
Well, the layperson, such as myself, would say one way perhaps to improve it is to give some of those residents and interns a little more sleep. Does it make sense to have them be so sleep deprived that apparently quite regularly they make mistakes?
Well, I think that the reasons for the shifts as they currently exist are the product of long, long years of experience that has shown that shifts, for example, in internal medicine of 36 hours of training is necessary in order for trainees to understand the beginning, the middle, the end of a patient's disease. It's much like going to a movie. You can't go into the middle of the movie and understand the full plot. You have to see the beginning, the middle, and the end. And we want our physicians to ultimately understand when they run into a case that they have seen before that they don't have to see the whole story. They can understand it from the piece that they have before them. But it takes experience, and it takes the ability to see the whole case unfold in order to gain that kind of experience that you and I want from our doctors.
Thank you, Joshua. So that's the power of analogy, and I think you can see the validity of doing that. Let's talk about using numbers and cases and studies. Of course, you want to have all this ready to go, but be smart about the numbers you use. Always try to localize numbers whenever possible. All news is local news. And please personalize those numbers. You and I will be exposed to hundreds of numbers today. The only numbers we'll actually remember when we go to sleep tonight are the numbers that had a face on them. If you miss your 7:05 flight back home, you're going to remember that number. If it takes you an hour and 2 minutes to drive from here to downtown Chicago, you're going to remember that number. My kid hits a triple tonight in the 6th inning, I'll remember that number. So what you can do to drive the numbers that you know are most important to your concerns is to put a face on those numbers. It's not 72%. It's 7 out of 10 women who live here in Bannockburn. Put a face on your numbers when you speak to the media, and not only are they more likely to quote those numbers, but people will remember those numbers. They're more easily cataloged in their minds. Plus, it allows you to personalize the issue. And third-party endorsement, obviously. Outside sources endorsing your point of view. Outside sources, as Kay had said, credentialed sources. Very, very important. Very important today. People want specifics, and it's the specifics that work. So listen for the specifics, document them, have a media file in your desk, and make sure that when you speak to the media, you speak top down, not bottom up, with the audience focus in mind, giving a solution to an unmet need, consistent message, and wonderful proof material. It took me 30 minutes to teach it. It only takes you 2 minutes to pull it together. And the common thread throughout this preparation method, this golf swing, is that you're always golfing with the end consumer in mind, whether that's the woman, the man, the patient. You're always speaking as a community advocate. And if you do that, eventually, what we know as Christians is that everything else has to fall into place, and it will. Let me give you one last video clip, then I'm going to give you a couple other quick tips before we call it to a close. I'm going to show you how the 5-step method worked just recently for a gentleman that represented my client, Motorola. There was a real sad case in Illinois. There was a woman who was driving her sick child to the doctor. Mom's in the front seat, kids in the back. Her cell phone rings. Mom reaches down to try to find her phone, loses control of the car, and kills a man. Now, the man she killed, his family not only pressed charges, Mom's in jail, but they filed a lawsuit, and they found a legislator in Springfield, Illinois, who wrote a bill that would require all of us to pull over before we use our cell phones. So Motorola, naturally, is affected by the issue. Good Morning America does 6 minutes of tape, crying and unanswered questions, riveting. And now that the media has comforted the afflicted, it's time to afflict the comfortable. So who are they going to blame? Let's go to the industry and see what they have to say about the problem. Well, the industry was ready. And the gentleman who spoke on behalf of Motorola, they chose a third-party person to speak for them. He decided instead of being defensive and reactive, he was going to use this as a chance to teach. So he used my 5-step method. And I'd like you to watch the focus, the message, and the vivid support. And above all else, he is your advocate in this interview. Play this tape, please, Joshua.
Representative Robert Bogelski, who's sponsoring legislation in that state that would restrict cell phone use by drivers. Joining us from Washington is Thomas Wheeler, the president of the Cellular Telecommunications Industry Association, and I appreciate both of you joining us. Mr. Wheeler, let me get you to respond to that piece. Here's a very tragic case. A woman reaches down to get her phone because she's dropped it when she's expecting a phone call from her doctor. An accident like that occurs.
I agree with Ms. McGill. I mean, that is a tragedy, and no phone conversation is that important. I think what it is important to recognize, however, is that the wireless phone in the car has been recognized by safety experts throughout the country, police departments, national government agencies, etc., as one of the great safety tools, because you can use it to report accidents, you can use it to save lives, you can use it to stop crimes, you can use it to bring help. 98,000 times a day, somebody uses their wireless phone to summon help. And so what we have to do is we have to help people understand that when they get behind the wheel, driving safely is their first responsibility. And the call can wait, and you can use good judgment just like you do in other things when you're behind the wheel.
Even calling a familiar number takes...
Just fending off a lawsuit, he was able to teach me something and make me realize something new. Having empathy at the beginning of your statements can be one of the best ways to disarm an enemy in a media interview. One of the best ways, and perhaps the only way. And I think he did it quite effectively. If you go to page 2, let me give you a couple of other quick tips, because I'm sure that your musician is over there rehearsing. Controlling your delivery. Delivery is important. When you're speaking to a print reporter on the phone, stand up. I am affected by the enthusiasm of your voice when you're on the phone with me. So stand up when you speak to a print reporter. Remember, there is no such thing as off the record. That is a myth. Don't ever fall into it. It will not be obeyed. Everything you say is subject to be used. Everything. Most reporters will not let you see the article before it's printed, but they will call you to check a quote. So give them your number if you want them to call and check back with you. Don't do an interview that's more than 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you're going to get tired. Keep to 20 minutes in a print interview. Radio, again, your voice is important. Sit on the edge of your seat, use your hands, and paint pictures on radio because people want to be able to see it. It's a great chance to visualize. And when you go to a radio program, always give me a place that I can go to for more information, especially when you're doing these shows where they call in with questions. You don't want to be stuck in a 2-hour debate with one particular caller. You want to be able to send him or her to someplace else for information. You know, that's something we don't talk to your personal doctor about. Well, let me give you a phone number where you can go right now to get more information on that issue. Give me a place I can go with the information for radio so you don't get caught in those long, drawn-out debates. Television, the way you look is important. It really is. If you go down to appearance, Kay's right, you want to smile. Not a silly grin, but pleasant and upbeat. And that applies to your print and radio interviews as well. If you're smiling on the phone, I hear it in your voice. Only look people in the eye. Don't look at the camera, or you're going to look like Ross Perot. Ross Perot always looked at the camera, and I felt like he was using it to get to me. TV is a medium for voyeurs. They're looking in on our conversation. Only look at me. The exception to the rules, if you do Nightline, I know some of you have done that, if you've done a remote interview where it's only you and the camera. That's the only time you look at a lens. If there's a person there, you speak to a person. And don't be tempted to look away, because your eyes tell me the story. That's why Mike Wallace always frames it right here. All you see is a person's eyes. And then when they ask the guy how much money he makes and he looks up at the ceiling, guilty, guilty. So you want to keep your eyes solid. Use your hands. Use your hands. If you grip the podium, your voice is going to get very boring because you're not allowing your vocal cords to do their job. You want to loosen up and visualize. By using your hands, not only is your face more interesting, but your vocal cords are allowed to do the job. And you'll get inflection, pause, you'll be interesting. So always use your hands. So never let any speech coach tell you not to use your hands. If you are thinking about what you're doing with your hands, Al Gore, you're not thinking about your content. I haven't given you any of my bias today, have you? And avoid this. You'll see at the bottom of the page, this is upspeak. My teenager is going to say to me tonight, can I go to the movie with Scott? And there's going to be 4 of us going, and you can pick us up at 9:20. And I know right away there's something funny going on. When your teenagers end like this at the end of their sentences, They're saying, do you believe me? Is this working, Mom? I want you to be definitive and come down at the end of your statements when you speak to the media or give a presentation. Really punctuate at the end for consistency and believability. And if you'd be so kind as to go to the very last category, how do you control the headline? We talked about this in your preparation method, but choice of words is important. Get rid of the jargon. Armamentarium, modality, patient presented with. No, that's not how you'd speak to a person on an airplane. So let's get rid of the jargon. Get rid of the acronyms that people don't understand. You'll never be quoted if you're using language that I cannot easily share with my audience. Media myths, I already talked about, there's no such thing as off the record. Don't take ownership for what you don't own. Don't speak for the opposition. And don't get sucked into what I call the David versus Goliath story, us versus them. If all the interview centers around is you versus them, you lose the chance to educate me on the realities of the issue. And it happens all the time, and it's tempting. But don't get drawn into David versus Goliath, us versus them. Most reporters, that's all they know how to write. Don't get drawn into it because you lose the chance to educate. And don't you get mad when the political candidates start sniping at each other and nobody's talking about the issues. Don't let it happen to you. And you can prevent that with a control technique called bridging, going from what they're asking you to what you really think is most important for the audience to hear. Remember, though, when you do bridging, you have to put your anchor down before you jump. A lot of politicians think you can just ignore the question and go to something else. I get really mad. You have to answer it. Yes? No? I don't know that. What I do know is this. And then you go back to what's really most important to your audience. Prompt questions. Next time you're going to do a local radio show, write down 3 really good, tough questions you've heard from people in that community. And say to the reporters, you know, I thought you might be interested in seeing 3 of the toughest questions we've heard in the last month. And these come right from the people who are probably listening to your show right now. Oh, let's see. They love you for that. When I was getting ready to go on with Sandy, she had nothing. She had a few notes on who I was, and she said to me, you know, what do you think we should talk about? You know, what are you going to talk about today? They're looking for you to help guide an interesting interview. So give them the questions, prompt the questions, and put a star in their notebook. Use phrases like, again, the one thing I hear every single day from the women in this community is, and keep coming back to your main point by using phrases like that. Drive the editing process. Drive what people remember. Make news, not just noise, and you will turn words into action. And first and foremost, if you always speak as the advocate for your community, again, everything else should eventually, I have faith, fall into place. So that concludes my remarks. The method is practical, it works, and it's designed to make your job even a little bit easier, because I appreciate the fact that you're speaking to the media. I appreciate the fact that it's frustrating and that you keep trying. And hopefully after my session, you'll be just a little bit better than you were at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you very much.